All right. Good afternoon. Today, in a short while, my guest will be Jane Ferguson, who is the UN Women's Special Representative in Afghanistan. She will be speaking to you from Kabul. And this is, of course, she's here to discuss the 4-year mark since the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. The Secretary General's 16th annual report on conflict-related sexual violence that I think you've been asking me about has now been published today on the webpage of the Office of the Special Representative for Sexual Violence in Conflict. The report marks a staggering 25% increase from the previous year, with the highest number of cases recorded in the Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Haiti, Somalia, and South Sudan. You also I encourage you to read the full report to get all the details, but to quickly summarize what has been included, 63 state and non-state parties are listed in the annex of the report, credibly suspected of committing or being responsible for patterns of rape and other forms of sexual violence in armed conflict, which is on the agenda of the Security Council. The report also introduces for the first time an appendix whereby parties are put on notice for potential listing in the next report of the Secretary General. Starting off with Ukraine today, our colleagues in the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tell us that as front lines shift, intense hostilities are continuing to inflict a heavy toll on civilians on a daily basis, causing widespread destruction and forcing thousands of people to flee their homes. In the Donetsk region, where fighting has escalated, Ukrainian authorities ordered the mandatory evacuations of families with children from over a dozen towns and villages. Between Monday and Wednesday this week, authorities report that more than 6,000 people fled high-risk communities along the front lines, either through organized evacuation or on their own accord. Relentless attacks are also impeding both evacuation of civilians and the delivery of aid to Pokrovsk town, located just a few kilometers from the front lines. Local Ukrainian authorities estimate that more than 1,000 people are still living there. Humanitarian access is worsening in the Konstantinivka town, where approximately 7,000 residents need urgent support. Aid organizations are working around the clock to assist those fleeing the violence, providing transportation and other assistance at transit sites for newly displaced people. The humanitarian coordinator for Ukraine, Matthias Schmale, is visiting the south of the country today. He met with displaced people in the community centers in Mykolaiv and discussed urgent needs with our partners and local authorities. On its latest update, our colleagues from the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine say the number of civilian casualties in Ukraine reached another 3-year high in July, with 286 civilians killed and 1,388 injured. The July UN casualty numbers are the highest since May of 2022. The UN Human Rights Mission says that the high July casualty numbers continued a pattern of steadily increasing civilian casualties in 2025. Casualty numbers for the first 7 months of 2025 were 48% higher than the same period in 2024. Turning to the ongoing horrific situation in Gaza, our humanitarian colleagues report that airstrikes and shelling have intensified in parts of Gaza City over the past couple of days, as attacks also continue on Deir al-Balah, Khan Yunis. Strikes are hitting residential buildings and tents housing displaced people, resulting in a high number of casualties. And as a reminder, if the Israeli ground operation in Gaza City moves ahead, thousands of families already in appalling humanitarian conditions could be pushed over the edge even further. With 86% of the Strip now in Israeli militarized zones or under displacement order, aid groups lack the access and supplies to address the dire humanitarian situation at the scale that is required. Any further loss of space, more mass displacement orders, or intensified attacks in populated areas could have devastating consequences. As a reminder, the Israeli ban on the entry of shelter material has also been in effect for over 5 months now. In recent days, temperatures have soared and hundreds of thousands of people are now left without protection from the heat. Nearly everyone in Gaza has been displaced at least once since the war began, and the makeshift shelters they managed to improvise or acquire have often either worn out or have been abandoned when they have been forced to flee. Meanwhile, yesterday, the World Health Organization supported the medical evacuation of 38 patients, mostly children from Gaza, alongside nearly 100 companions. We reiterate our call for a ceasefire, the unconditional and immediate release of all hostages still being held in Gaza, and the unimpeded humanitarian access for us and all our partners. Turning to Syria, we and our humanitarian partners continue to deliver vital assistance to people impacted by the recent violence in the southern part of that country. In the governorates of Sueda, Dara, and rural Damascus, UN agencies and their partners are supporting both people who fled and have been displaced and the communities that are hosting those people. Between August 5th and yesterday, we supported 4 aid convoys through the Syrian Arab Red Crescent, which yesterday delivered critical assistance to Sueda, including food, hygiene kits, medical supplies, and fuel to access to restore water pumps. One of the convoys counted 21 trucks that delivered 250 metric tons of flowers, as well as food baskets, water containers, fuel, and 7 dialysis machines. The World Food Program and UNICEF provided these supplies. But of course, more support is urgently needed. More than 190,000 people were displaced by the recent violence, which has also disrupted basic services and commercial supplies. Over the past week, 920 families have left Sueda Governorate, with some 370 families returned, according to the Syrian Civil Defense Organization. Our humanitarian colleagues also warn that the ongoing insecurity and sporadic violence continue to impede better humanitarian access to Sueda. Just last week, a Syrian Arab Red Crescent convoy came under fire in Dara Governorate. Despite ongoing insecurity and operational challenges, we continue to engage closely with Syrian authorities and other partners to strengthen the response. And moving to Lebanon and southern Lebanon, where our peacekeeping colleagues are operating. I have my note right here. Our peacekeepers tell us that they continue to discover unauthorized weapons, unauthorized ammunition, and infrastructure in southern Lebanon. Yesterday, they found rocket launchers, rocket shells, mortar rounds, and bomb fuses in Sector East. On Tuesday, the peacekeepers observed a tunnel in Sector West with rocket launchers and mortar shells inside. These were referred to the Lebanese armed forces as per standard practice. In addition, UNIFIL observed continued Israeli Defense Forces military activities in the area of operations, including airstrikes in Sector West and artillery shelling from the south of the Blue Line with points of impact in Sector East. That took place yesterday. UNIFIL continues to conduct training activities with the Lebanese Army personnel in support of our efforts of capacity building of the LAF. This week, UNIFIL engineers conducted trainings on surveying, locating, and extracting explosive devices, procedures for safety exiting mined areas, and securing sites potentially containing explosive devices. Such training activities are crucial now as the Lebanese armed forces engage daily in identifying and securing areas contaminated with unexploded ordnances and explosive remnants of war. At sea, the mission's Maritime Task Force yesterday held an exercise with the Lebanese Army personnel. Lebanese Air Force personnel. In Sudan, our humanitarian colleagues are continuing to provide us with updates on the dire conditions there. We're extremely alarmed by the continued rapid spread of cholera in different parts of the country, especially in the Darfur region. In the past week alone, our health partners recorded 40 cholera-related deaths in the region. Treatment to more than 2,300 patients have been provided by our partners at facilities run by the Ministry of Health. But in Tawila, the cholera treatment centers have been overwhelmed. As you well know, in Tawila, hundreds of thousands of people are hosted after fleeing hostilities in and around El Fasher and Darfur State. You may also recall that last month, the emergency relief coordinator Tom Fletcher, allocated $5 million from the Central Emergency Response Fund to support the cholera response in Sudan, but more resources are needed for that response without delay. Humanitarian partners need 50 million United States dollars to sustain their cholera operations through the end of 2025. Meanwhile, active fighting, insecurity, and bureaucratic impediments continue to block or delay our access to areas impacted by famine and other locations in acute need. El Fasher in North Darfur remains besieged and cut off from humanitarian support. Humanitarian access is also constrained in the Kordofan region, where fighting persists along key supply routes. The closure of these routes has severely disrupted the delivery of vital goods and worsened economic conditions, triggering displacement and a worsening of the humanitarian situation. As nutrition needs deepen, the humanitarian community is responding wherever it can. In East Darfur, to identify acute cases or refer children for treatment, our partners, supported by UNICEF, screened 32,000 children under the age of 5 for malnutrition last month alone. A similar effort in June reached 15,000 children. We continue to reiterate that all parties engaged in this conflict must adhere to their obligations under international law, under international humanitarian law, including facilitating the unimpeded humanitarian access and protecting civilians from harm. And a quick update from Myanmar, where the situation there is not any better. The country continues to grapple with repeated shocks, including devastating conflict, flooding, and other disasters that have stripped millions of people in Myanmar of their homes, their shelter, their livelihoods, and sense of safety. Conflict between the Myanmar armed forces and various non-state armed groups continue to force civilians to flee their homes, exposing them to serious harm and protection risks. Since early July, heavy rains have also triggered widespread flooding and landslides, displacing families and damaging homes, roads, and other critical infrastructure. We, along with our humanitarian partners, have reached nearly 1.3 million people impacted by the earthquake that took place on March 28th of this year. However, underfunding continues to hamper our response. Funding cuts have forced reduction across all sectors of the humanitarian response in Myanmar, leaving vulnerable people desperate and dangerous situations and even more vulnerable. Myanmar remains one of the world's most underfunded humanitarian operations. We have $136 million in the bank, but we need $1.1 billion for this year's appeal. That's just, so we've only gotten about 12%. We call on all donors to step up their funding. And I'll end, unfortunately, with a tragic note from the Eastern Mediterranean, and I can tell you that we join our colleagues at IOM and UNHCR in expressing our deep sadness by the capsizing of a boat that occurred yesterday off the coast of Lampedusa, in the central Mediterranean, of Lampedusa in Italy, in which at least 35 people are feared dead or missing, including children. According to the information gathered by our colleagues from the 60 survivors that were brought to safety in Lampedusa, about 95 people had departed from Zawiya in Libya on 2 boats. One of the boats began taking on water and all passengers were transferred to the other, which was a fiberglass boat, which later capsized due to overcrowding. Reported nationalities on board were Egyptians, Somalis, Sudanese, and Pakistanis. Filippo Grandi, our High Commissioner for Refugees, pointed out that over 700 refugees and migrants have now died to date in the central Mediterranean. And that is, that's just the deaths that were recorded. No doubt there are many more. I'm done, Deji. And then
today, the conflict-related sexual violence report of the Secretary General has been released. This year we saw a new content called Unnoticed, which put Israel and Russia. What
unnoticed?
Yeah, unnoticed.
Oh, unnoticed. Yes,
unnoticed. Not listed,
yes,
but
okay.
unnoticed.
Yes.
So what's the? I mean, why there's this new category here? Unnoticed.
Well, I think it was part. The report created this new category because of the consistent denial of access to UN monitors in the context of both the Israeli and occupied Palestinian territory conflict and the temporarily occupied parts of Ukraine. That made it challenging to verify and definitively determine the patterns, the trends, and the systematicity of sexual violence in these contexts.
Which means there's suspicion, but you cannot verify.
Right.
That's why it's
that's
put
on
on
notice.
notice.
Yes.
Okay.
Edie.
Thank you, Steph. Israel has announced new settlement construction in the West Bank, which the Palestinians and human rights groups say will basically destroy prospects for a two-state solution by cutting the West Bank in two parts. Does the Secretary General have any comment on this announcement?
Well, as far as I saw, I think that was also the statement made by the Israeli finance minister to eliminate the possibility of a two-state solution. Our position on settlements is clear. The Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and the regime that's associated with these settlements go against international law. Settlements, to state the obvious, further entrench the occupation, put the prospect of a two-state solution even further away. And as you said, if this went ahead, and which we call on the Israeli government not to do, and we call them to reverse to stop the advancement of this process, it would sever the northern and southern West Banks. And I think, interestingly enough, as the Israeli finance minister and the Palestinians and other NGOs all agree, it would put an end to the prospects of a two-state solution. Pam, then Benny.
Thanks, Steph. Since we're looking at Ukraine because of the summit coming up tomorrow, has there been any progress on the Commissioner Volker Turk investigation, the UN human rights, or any other inquiry or negotiations on the children that were taken to Russia during the war? The 20,000. There were 11 returned in August, but there doesn't seem to be.
I'm not aware, unfortunately, of any progress on that front, but we will check for you.
Thank you.
Benny?
So I have two questions and maybe a third after that. So the first one, you mentioned the anniversary of Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
There was a report just issued by the U.S. watchdog on reconstruction of Afghanistan called CIGAR. Not for you, no cigar for you. That claims that a lot of the, if I remember correctly, $3 billion that were dispersed by the UN was diverted to the Taliban, including, they say, and I quote, by colluding with the Taliban was colluding with senior UN officials to demand kickbacks from UN vendors. Any thought?
Yes, a few thoughts. We're obviously aware of the publication by the Special Inspector General. I think what the report does very clearly show is the extremely complex environment in which United Nations agencies operate to deliver aid in Afghanistan, and the interference and the restrictions imposed on the UN by the de facto authorities who control Afghanistan, the Taliban. Such interference has included attempts to influence recruitment and beneficiary selection process, a request for confidential staffing and budgetary information, pressure to change established aid delivery modalities, and restrictions on or threats against female national staff members that impede their essential role in supporting the Afghan people. we've been operating in Afghanistan for quite some time, and I can tell you that our colleagues at the UN country team, which includes the funds, the programs, the agencies, have implemented robust safeguards and risk management process to ensure that critical international assistance reaches those people that need it most. Where and when necessary, some programs, such as in-kind cash assistance, have been halted, and we've engaged with the de facto authorities at the various level. I can tell you that also, if you take and your colleagues and everyone takes the time to look at the quarterly reports from UNAMA, they are mandated to report on the risks of a diversion, and they've reported this consistently to the Security Council. Now, we obviously take very seriously any allegation of malpractice, of corruption by UN officials or implementing partners, and we try to ensure that they're promptly investigated. But we continue to operate based on our humanitarian principles and reinforced by comprehensive safeguarding policies and various procedures that include independent needs assessment, screening and vetting of partners and vendors, as well as extensive monitoring, including by third parties and community feedback. And we also continue to push with the de facto authorities to let us do our work free from any harassment and interference. But I think as you know and others know, delivering humanitarian aid in an area that is, in a country that is controlled by the de facto authorities, and it's not the only place in the world, is extremely, extremely challenging, to say the least.
And the part about senior UN officials and bribes,
I said,
is
if
that
anyone
investigated by OIOS?
Anyone has an information, it needs to be brought forward, and I'm sure my colleagues in Afghanistan will be in touch with a special inspector on that.
Okay, second question. There was an op-ed that I'm sure you've seen yesterday in the Wall Street Journal about the ship Yemen that was purchased by the UN in 2023 that, according to that report, is basically serving as a fuel depot for the local people, as we call the Houthis.
De facto authorities.
De facto authorities, right.
Again, a challenging place. I'm aware of the op-ed that was published in the Wall Street Journal. It's not the first, they're not the first to have reported on this. What is important to note that the UN does not own the tanker, the Yemen tanker. It was transferred from the UN to the what's called the Safar Exploration Production Operation Company as part of the project to remove the oil from the Safar. I mean, if you'll recall, we had been talking for years and years about the risks that the Safar posed as it was decomposing with huge amount of oil on board. Our colleagues at UNDP managed a very delicate operation, which I think saved the Red Sea and all those who live and depend on the Red Sea from an environmental catastrophe. UNDP has a contract with an international maritime company for advisory services, only to support the safe ongoing storage of the oil after it was removed from the Safar. The transfers that are being reported on by the Wall Street Journal and others are done by this local company, CPOC, independently of the Safar. The oil that was removed from the Safar remains removed and remains on board the Yemen. I can tell you that as a matter of due diligence in the advisory capacity on each occasion, UNDP has strongly objected to CPOC, which owns the vessel, both verbally and in writing, and requested that these transfers cease immediately. UNDP has no knowledge of the origins or destination of the vessels involved in these transfers.
And a third question quickly. In a letter you sent, not you, Secretary General, which is mini
I know him. Yeah,
Mini-me.
Yeah.
Sent to the Israeli ambassador in advance of the publication of that report. he wrote that the report is based on information verified by the United Nations. You just said that, that it's the United Nations can't investigate.
I mean,
so how was it verified?
It verified in terms of what was in the narrative of the report. Obviously, the information that was gathered by Ms. Patton's office led them to put them on notice, and as well as other parties in different conflicts.
Because there was a very celebrated case in State Teman detention center that was that is still pending actually in Israeli courts. In other words, what I'm trying to say is Israeli courts are investigating any allegations of sexual impropriety.
And we've noted,
so
we've noted
why
that
do we
publicly
need
from
the
here.
UN for that?
Well, it's the mandate. It's a mandate given to the Secretary General by the Security Council.
No, why do we need UN access if there is?
UN
can go to Israeli courts
the special
and find out.
representative has a mandate given to her by the Security Council to investigate these things. Lenka, you've been very patient. Then Gabriel, you've also been very patient. Everybody's very patient.
Thank you, Steph. Regarding tomorrow's summit, President Trump said he will be focused on a peace deal more than on immediate ceasefire. And he said that the rate of success for this meeting should be around 75%. What are the expectations of the Secretary General? Is he hopeful that it will lead to success? Thank you.
Look, we're not in the betting game. We've seen a lot of commentary in advance of the summit. I think we do welcome the dialogue at the highest level between these two permanent members of the Security Council, and a lot of issues on the agenda. Our position regarding the war in Ukraine remains the same, that we want an immediate, full, and unconditional ceasefire as a first step towards finding a just and sustainable and comprehensive peace, one that upholds Ukraine's sovereignty, its territorial integrity and independence, with an internationally recognized border and in line with the UN Charter, international law, and all relevant UN resolutions. We'll obviously be watching what happens, and we'll be watching what comes out of it. Gabriel.
Thanks, Steph. I have several follow-ups, but I know you have a guest waiting, or we have a guest waiting, so I'll try to be as succinct as possible. Follow-up to Edie's question on the illegal settlements. I took note of your comments, and it was very clear. However, would you acknowledge that this isn't just any illegal settlement? This is the highly controversial E1 that's been on hold since 2005 due to international pressure because, as Edie noted, it would divide East Jerusalem and the occupied West Bank. This could potentially end any contiguous Palestinian state. Does the Secretary acknowledge that?
I said it, and I said exactly that this is you're right, this is not any other expansion of a settlement. And as I just told Edie, I think you look at the statements coming out from people on both sides of this issue, they all say the same thing, that this may very well drive a stake through the prospect of a two-state solution.
And on the sexual violence report, clearly nobody wants to be added to the annex of this report. The Secretary General decided to include Hamas in the annex. Anyone can read the report to get the reasons. Israel, of course, only in the appendix. Did the Secretary General bow to Israeli pressure?
No. Sinan.
Thank you, Steph. I have also a few questions. I will be happy if you can stay with me. First,
I can't leave. I have no choice.
The UN Syria Commission of Inquiry today published a report regarding deadly violence in Syria's other white majority coastal areas in March, and the report says the violence led to 1,400 dead, and it was a systematic and likely amount to war crime. Does Secretary General sees those things? And in addition, what we saw in Sueda are
I think that will have to be decided by a court, but regardless, I think the conclusions of the IIM are extremely worrying. They echo what we've been saying, our human rights colleagues have been saying, what Mr. Pedersen had been saying. It is the responsibility of those in power in Syria, of those in power in Damascus, to ensure that everyone in Syria, all Syrians, feel safe and feel protected and do not risk being killed, harassed, or kidnapped just because of their religion or ethnicity.
And,
Yes, ma'am, please.
So in terms of tomorrow's summit, and the U.S. and Russia is meeting without Ukraine being presented, and it is said that there are some deals gonna be made in terms of the future of Ukraine. What would be the UN's position and attitude?
I don't want. Let's not comment on something that has yet to happen. We have said, and I think, and I use here the royal we, I said, I think earlier this week, one of your colleagues asked, that as a matter of principle, when you're trying to settle any conflict, if you want a just and sustainable peace, it's helpful to have all the parties of the conflict at the table, the same table. That being said, let's wait to see what comes out of the summit tomorrow. Pam, then Deji.
Very quick follow-up to Benny's question, the first one, on the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan report. Will that be made public?
The report?
Yeah?
It is public.
Okay.
I mean, it's a U.S. report. They put it up on their website a day and a half ago.
Okay, and on the, I hadn't seen it, on the reference to a current UN official, is that something that you're investigating?
Well, I mean, we're obviously, we're reading this report with you, so we will obviously look into all these allegations. Deji.
Thank you.
Also follow up on Benny's second question about the Yemen tanker. The Yemen tanker has been purchased or acquired by UNDP at that time, right? So it's been sold?
So what's, I don't understand, what is
if
the question? We do not own the oil that's in
you own the tanker, right?
We do not own the oil that's in the tanker.
Because Yemen was acquired by the UN for $55 million. I mean the tanker, not the oil.
No, and the tanker was transferred to CPOC as well.
So it's also been
exactly.
It's been sold.
Exactly.
For how much and when?
I don't know. We'll try to get you those dates.
Okay.
All right. On that note, thank you all, and I want to thank our guest, Jane Ferguson, who's been very patient. If we could put her on the screen. Hi, Jane. Thank you for your patience. We know it's late over there, but we welcome you to this briefing. We'll give you the floor for a few minutes, and then I know you'll be excited to answer the questions.
Thank you very much, Steph, and good evening, everyone from Kabul. My name's actually Susan Ferguson.
My bad.
No worries at all. So let me start with UN Women's strong commitment to stand with every woman and girl whose life has been affected by violence in Sudan, in Ukraine, in Palestine, in Israel, and in women's homes all around the world, and of course in Afghanistan. It's now 4 years since the Taliban takeover in Afghanistan. In the years since, dozens of decrees have continued to severely limit Afghan women and girls' rights, freedoms, and their dignity. These restrictions are not temporary, not one has been reversed. It is the most severe women's rights crisis in the world, and it's being normalized. Our latest data from our regular door-to-door surveys shows that despite systemic and continuous limitations on their lives, 40% of Afghan women actually still imagine a future where change and equality are possible. This hope is a lifeline and it's a political strategy. This is a personal act of resilience and resistance, even as 75% of more than 2,000 women we interviewed described their mental health as poor or very poor. As Afghan women hold fiercely to this hope, The introduction last year of the so-called morality law was a defining turning point in Afghanistan, crystallizing the systematic erasure of women from public life. It codified long-held social norms existing for generations in some parts of the country into a rigid system of control, and it's already reshaping daily life. Our analysis shows family and community members and even some businesses are now policing women's behaviour themselves, driven by social pressure and fear of Taliban reprisals. This is how normalisation works. It's woven into the fabric of everyday life. Although Afghanistan's security incidents have remained low, the tragedy is that women's security has not. Women continue to feel and often are unsafe in public places and in their families and are unable to reap the benefits of an increase in the overall security situation since the takeover. When it comes to education and employment, women and girls are still barred from high schools, universities, and most jobs, devastating a generation of young Afghan women. Earlier this year, UN Women found that nearly 80% of young Afghan women are not in education, employment, or training, compared to 20% of men. Exclusion harms women, and it also harms their families, communities, and the country as a whole. Women continue to be systematically excluded from political and public life. The continued social and economic exclusion of women is projected to cost Afghanistan an estimated $920 million between 2024 and 26. 4 years into the takeover, the de facto cabinet remains entirely composed of men, a pattern that is mirrored at the subnational level. Some women have engaged informally with local and national de facto authorities to raise concerns about their communities and organisations. But there's no institutional mechanisms for women to have a say in decisions affecting their lives. In 2021, the Taliban introduced a decree enshrining women's rights to inheritance and banning forced marriages. This is a narrow foothold to build on. However, sadly, many women and men we consulted were unaware of the decree, and most felt the decree had not changed society's long-held practices. The return of Afghan women and girls from Iran and Pakistan is further deepening the women's rights crisis in Afghanistan. Already this year, more than 1.7 million Afghans have returned, many forcibly. Women and girls represent 1/3 of returnees from Iran so far, and half from Pakistan. Many return to no home, no income, and no access to education or healthcare, arriving in communities already stretched to breaking point by the economic crisis and climate shocks, and where their choices and freedoms are restricted. They urgently need both humanitarian assistance and long-term support to rebuild their lives. And they can only access this support through women humanitarians, as this is a context where they cannot interact with men aid workers. Since 2021, women-led organisations have been on the front lines in Afghanistan, delivering services such as healthcare, psychosocial support and protection from violence, and they continue to do so. But across civil society organisers surveyed by the UN in March this year, half of all women staff had already lost their jobs due to funding cuts. More than 1/3 of organisations reported that if the current situation continues, their ability to reach women and girls would be severely reduced, scaled down or shut down. No doubt Afghan women and girls are bearing the brunt of global aid cuts in the country. Despite this very difficult picture, Afghan women are still resisting. Afghan women continue to find ways to operate in this environment, negotiating carefully within the margins to be able to run their businesses, find ways to educate themselves, help others access support, and raise their voices in important international meetings. Many are able to do this because of donor funds to support them, funds which are reducing. But many still imagine a different future. if we ignore the tightening strictures on Afghan women and girls, we send a message that this is normal and that the rights of women and girls everywhere are disposable or irrelevant. We cannot accept the denial of their rights as the new normal. We must keep investing in their NGOs, their businesses, and their voice in international dialogues. We must stand up for all women and girls in Afghanistan. Thank you very much.
Open for floor. Edie, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ferguson. On behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association, welcome and thank you for doing the briefing. My name is Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. During your time in Afghanistan, have you had the opportunity to meet with any Taliban officials and make the case you've just made to us to them? Or are they refusing to meet with anyone from UN Women?
I have met with a Taliban official actually just yesterday, and we continue to meet with Taliban officials both at national and subnational level. We have to meet with Taliban officials because we need to discuss some of the barriers that may be put up that impact our work, and we really need to engage with them to change some of these barriers. And we do talk to the Taliban regularly about these things, and actually we also, the reports that we do are shared with the Taliban, and we hope that they also influence some of their own policy decisions.
Said that nothing had changed in any of the decrees and edicts that the Taliban have made since they took power. Did you get any indication that there was any possibility of any change in your discussions?
I think that that's a broad question for the UN as well. And I do not think that the restrictions will be reduced in the immediate term. I can't hear you.
How's that? Okay, better here. It's Pamela Falk. Thank you, Ms. Ferguson. It's Pamela Falk, U.S. News and World Report. A follow-up on Edie's question. There was a planned protest around the world by Afghan women, but also in Kabul. How did that go, and are there repercussions on women who protest? And then just as a bit of a follow-up, how does the Taliban deal with UN agencies? Obviously, you're speaking with them. Do they allow information into women? They clearly did not allow any UNICEF schools or anything like that. What are they allowing and what aren't they? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, one of the things that they are allowing Afghan women, there is a recognition that returnees who are women and girls need women to be there to meet them and to help them access services. So this is one area that is an opening for women and girls in the country, and for us to continue to support the really important work that women humanitarians are doing, especially at this moment where there is an increase in returnees. So there are other opportunities also where, including, we work a lot with women-owned businesses, small businesses often, and some larger ones. to support women to gain access to finance and markets and that sort of thing. So there are still opportunities to provide support to women and also women-led organisations.
Please.
Oh, yeah, there it goes. I can hear it. Any repercussions on Afghan women who protest that you know about?
I'm not sure of the answer to that question. So I will find out and get back to you.
Can you hear me? This is Dulcie Lineback from Pass Blue. I'm just a little confused because you say that women can't work, but then are you talking about entrepreneurs can actually keep businesses going? Okay, and what's an example of an entrepreneur, a typical entrepreneur in Afghanistan? And then you said some women can run large businesses. So what are you referring to? Thanks.
So in the world of work, many jobs are not accessible for women to do anymore. There are certain bans in different sectors, but there are other sectors where women can still work. For example, women can be teachers of girls who are, up to grade 6. There are still women midwives, and there are other, various sectors where women can work. So the kinds of businesses that we provide support to are often small businesses, so women-owned livelihood businesses where they may work in their own homes. But we've also worked, for example, in Bamayan, where there's a women's market, and many women own businesses and they gather together and run a market, and we've been able to provide solar power so that there's energy in that market. And have worked with them to access other markets for their goods. There is a wonderful women-owned business that makes reusable sanitary pads, and they employ, I think, 50 women, and they are a successful business, and there are other opportunities to support growing those kinds of businesses. I hope that explains it. It's not, often in Afghanistan, there is not one size fits all. The situation changes from state to state and from sector to sector as well.
I mean, so how do they the Taliban justify allowing some women to work in some ways and not in others?
I can't really explain the Taliban's mindset. But I think some of the businesses that are allowed to operate are perhaps seen more as a sector that may be appropriate to women's roles, for example.
Please, Iftikhar, you can go ahead. I think we missed Iftikhar. Maybe I'm going to try with Abdel Hamid now, and I will go back to you, Iftikhar. Abdel Hamid, please.
Can you please explain to me how do you communicate with Afghani women? Do you visit them? Do they come to you? How you collect your information about Afghan women? Which language you use when you encounter Afghan women? How do they communicate their complaints to you as well? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. So we have a large staff cohort of women Afghans, and of course they have language skills, and we also have men Afghans, and they also obviously have language skills. So there are, that's one really important way, and that's in Afghanistan. We really rely on our Afghan colleagues to be able to be a bridge language-wise. But there are also a number of Afghan women who speak English, which is my language, and I am able to speak to a number of Afghan women myself. But certainly our Afghan staff are exceptionally important. And the surveys that we do across the country, we have a range of enumerators who speak all the different languages in Afghanistan and are trained to collect the information and communicate. So we also work, in fact, a big part of our work is supporting women-led organisations, and we provide funds to more than 200 women CSOs across the country. And they also, work in their own communities, in their own languages and their own culture, navigating the different ways to provide services and talk to other women.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
This is Iftikhar Ali from Associated Press of Pakistan. The recent UNAMA report describes the sad situation of the women and girls in Afghanistan and calls for urgent action before this situation gets normalized. What kind of action are you looking for?
So in UN Women, our key way of working is to support Afghan women have a voice at a range of different decision-making tables, and that is still possible in different ways. So what we require is funding for those women-led organisations, because they're an important way of holding the space for women across the country to demonstrate leadership and to provide services that are much needed to the populations that they work in. So we urgently need more funds to provide that kind of support to women. And it's a number of these women are also providing this humanitarian support for returnees. And again, we need funds to be able to provide that to them so that these women can enter the country safely and settle safely.
Do we have any further questions here on the floor? If not, I just would like to thank our guests again today. Susan Ferguson, the UN Special Representative for Afghanistan, who was briefing us from Kabul today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone in the audience. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you.